Anyway, thanks for bearing with me last week. I did have a message off Jim saying that I look like crap. But other than that, I'm well. It's battening down the hatches, getting on with things. So I thought this week it would have been a good idea to look at the island of Sicily and look at something specific, but then I realised very few people know about the island of Sicily, so I've just sort of done a weird overview of some of the archaeology on Sicily. And we start off with a really early subject matter. So one thing that we can say about the archaeology of Sicily, it's one of those gems of the archaeological world in the Mediterranean. It's got some examples of the best surviving archaeological remains of certain types of structures and archaeology. In regards to temples, this has got to be an island that preserves some of the best types of temples to be found associated with the Greek world anywhere in the Mediterranean. So I don't know whether some of you have been to the island of Sicily, and I was having a blonde moment earlier on in the week when I was typing in Sicily, and I kept coming up with the Scilly Islands, but then I realised I couldn't spell Sicily, so eventually I actually got there. So I think what we'll do, we'll start off with island of Sicily itself. Now, I'll be clear that we've got little islands off the North Sicilian coast, and we've got another little one on the west coast as well. And the Messina Canyon would be known very much for various shipwrecks associated with the invasion of Allied troops into Italy in the Second World War. But Sicily itself is a landscape that is full of contrasts. It's got a world of Carthaginians, which we've never looked at the Carthaginians at all, actually. It looks at the Roman world, it looks at the Greek world, it looks at very early prehistoric world as well. You're looking at the Arabs, you're looking at the Normans as well. The Normans actually held Sicily for quite some years as well. So it's a world that is very much full of archaeology that is extremely diverse. So I'm not going to do this today and have a map alongside the sites that we look at. You're going to have to scratch and sniff and just basically go with the flow. So if you need any other information, just take the place names down that I'm talking about, and we'll go from there. So Messina, if you know Sicily itself, Palermo, again, that stands out. And obviously you've got Syracuse, so you've got three of the famous locations on the island of Sicily. So anyway, without further ado, let's just crack on. So the first weird bit of archaeology I want to look at, and I'm going to say weird, is actually a very much odd area of human interchange between other animals. And at the top now, we're going to say straight away that we've got archaeological evidence for elephants, and what we've also got archaeological evidence for the hippopotamus living on the island of Sicily. And we do know that early human interchange 12,000 years ago or more, the elephant and the hippopotamus were living alongside human beings. But when there was a massive wave of human beings onto the island of Sicily around 8,000 years ago, 9,000 years ago, these two types of animals became completely extinct. And the other reason why looking at these elephants and the hippopotamus is a rather interesting is that the Sicilian dwarf elephant, which the original elephants managed to get over to Sicily when you were able to walk over to it. In the past 10,000 years, the water level in the Mediterranean has risen 100 meters. So well before that, it's very likely that you would have had waves and waves of elephants and the hippopotamus onto these islands, and they managed to get all the way out to the likes of Cyprus and Crete, and they all managed to get all the way north to Corsica. So that's an interesting area before we start. So obviously with these animals came some early human ancestors, but when the island became a bit more isolated, then humans would go over there, and the elephants and the hippopotamus was very vulnerable. And the reason why the elephant was very vulnerable, the island-bound elephant was an example of insular dwarfism, with an adult male specimen measuring, wait for it, just to shoulder height. So it's to top. If I had a little elephant now, I could stroke it. I could say, "Hello, little elephant." There it is. Hello. These were the full-grown adult was no more than a meter in height, shoulder height, and weighed not a whopping 350. Start again. 305 to 300 kilograms in weight, which is the weight of half the weight of a modern day mini, for example. Female specimens were smaller, at 80 centimeters in height, and they weighed half the weight of the male. Now, again, this is an example of how humans can completely devastate an island and its flora and fauna. We look, for example, when we looked at the Bahamas, and we looked at the blue holes of the Bahamas, that we had, for example, the land tortoise becoming extinct because of human interaction. We saw the crocodile becoming extinct as well. So the same thing can be said about these islands in the Mediterranean, but it's alongside human evidence that we actually find early human evidence, that we actually find evidence of the dwarf elephant, for example. And a similar story could be said in regards to when we look at in regards to the. Hang on a minute, did we see? Oh, we haven't got an image of a hippopotamus. Oh, there we go. There he is. Hippopotamus. I forgot he was actually there. Sorry. So we've actually got the hippopotamus. Now, hippopotamus was actually slightly bigger than the elephant. And you may have thought that hippopotamus could have survived in the watery pools around Sicily, but no, nevertheless, it became extinct. And that was, again, even though it's just slightly bigger than the elephant, again, that became extinct. All of these examples, the elephant, it was we knew that it was an elephants on Sicily in 1867, and the hippopotamus in 1832. And to give you an idea of the scale of these animals, where they're completely dwarfed, is to actually show you to show you an image that looks small, but look at that. That's how big they were. You can tell how small that elephant is by just looking at that. It's absolutely tiny. It's said that from tail to tip of the tusk, it was maximum length of just over 2 meters in length. So it's just like from there to sort of over to there. It's like, it's not that big at all, is it? So again, the human impact that we have had, this is clear proof that we can be blamed for the extinction of the species, these individual sets of fauna. And again, when you look at the islands of Madagascar and the Bahamas, and if the Galapagos would have been occupied by human beings, we would have lost practically all of the native fauna, if not the flora of the island, as we saw with Easter Island. This is why we've got to leave these islands alone, and that's where they're to be left alone. And just sort of out of interest, I know it's a really queer one to actually start off with. I've just clicked on the Wikipedia image here of the spread of these mammoths and the hippopotamuses around the Mediterranean. We'll just have a quick look at this little map. And there it is. So they're going all the way over to Sardinia, Sicily. We've got examples of them, for example, on Malta, Crete, Rhodes, Cyprus. So again, I know it's more sort of paleontological, but but the point being made here, the real point being made here, is that human beings were directly responsible for the extinction of these animals, complete extinction. So this is why I've put that in there today. So let's go back to these images, and what I'd like to do is go on to something equally stranger. So we wanted a little bit of an overview of Sicily, and I just thought, well, let's just look at something else. So I'm just gonna close that there, and I'm just going to find out where my stuff is. So what does this look like to you, Keith, or am I asking the right person? Where does this look like to you?
It looks like Tinkinswood, or one of those local ones around here.
Do you know what? I wouldn't slap you on the rear end for that one. That's smack on. Now what I'm going to do, I've got a similar sort of angle. If I can get that one up right, and what we're going to do with the miracles of the internet, if I can do that. What I'm going to do is screen share both images on the screen. And so, hang on a minute. That's the wrong one. Hang on. That's just that's the wrong image. Not the one I wanted. Hang on. Right there. That's the one I wanted. Bingo. Good. One. Do you see that?
Yeah.
One is in Sicily, and the other one's in Wales. And they've got a few of these dolmens on Sicily. The one on the right, on Sicily, and the one on the left is Tinkinswood Burial Chamber. And two things. Well, these have got everything in common basically. But one of the clear things is that in the middle, when they were excavating, they had to put this supporting column. So the pillar in the middle is a supporting column. The one on the left was placed there precisely in 1914, because that's what it says on the plaque, and that one on the right there was placed a little bit sort of in the past 60-70 years, I think. So it's very similar, and the argument always is that there would have been a slab on that side there, but it's clearly absent on both. So in reconstructions, archaeologists always show that there was an ocelith standing where that open space is, but it's clear evidence on both examples it's missing, and nobody's ever really explained that. When you go to Tinkinswood Burial Chamber, they've always put it on the reconstruction. Maybe it was never there. I think the point of this is that 2 points really is that the one on the right, the one in Sicily, dates to about 4,000 years ago, and then somebody then asked me on Tuesday whether the builders of Sicily influenced the builders over in our country. And the answer is no, because the examples on Sicily are 4,000 years old, and this example is actually 5,500 years old. So this was constructed 1,500, if not more, before the one on the right. So, and then somebody said, oh, does it mean to say that people from Wales managed to get all the way over to Sicily? And then the answer is quite clear, that the people building these chambers decided to build them, and that's basically why they did them. It's the same as your Keith, your brother building a pond in West Wales. They're just building a pond in West Wales. There's nothing to do with somebody building a pond in Cardiff. It's because he wanted to do it. And this is what we talk with. This is what we say. We call it determinism. And the Goff is determined to prove that it's very cold in its house today. So and the weights of these capstones, the one on the right, for example, is probably around 55 tons. The one on the left is between 45 and 50 tons, and the tonnage weight was a lot greater when these were originally erected. And so I just wanted to chuck that in there as just a little bit of a weird thing to sort of give you again an idea of this wonderful, rich prehistoric landscape of the island of Sicily, to just give you a sort of tiny little bit of an overview. Do you know what? I'm struggling to work out which is which now. Right, so we're back to where we were. And when we think about this type of chamber, it's not known as the Dolmen Dei Avola, and the Dolmen Dei Avola. Dolmen, that's an interesting word, because the word dolmen is actually a word used on the island of Sicily, as it's spelled, dolmen. That's what my notes tell me. The word dolmen is the word used on Sicily, spelt the same as the word dolmen used in Cornwall. It's just the name for an associated type of monument that you actually see thousands of miles apart. Now, again, there's that thing that British archaeologists are arguing, that our chambers in this country may have been used for something else before they were used for burial. We don't precisely know, is this a burial chamber that they're actually using this for in Sicily, or is there another meaning that we have for this? So, you know, there's all these really, really interesting questions. So then what I wanted to do was move on to another little bit of an area, and that little bit of an area is to actually give you an overview of the types of historical contexts that we actually find in Sicily, to sort of paint the picture of who's occupied the island over the many thousands of years. And that's exactly where we're going to go now. I'm just going to make sure I've got all that up there. Yeah, it's all up there ready for me to just give you that little bit of an overview. So let's just change the image. Oh, there's another one of our burial chamber images. Doesn't that look like really really treacherous? You know, you can imagine that as an archaeologist excavating something like that, you know that the roof is going to come down any minute. So I'll just leave that to the volunteers to do. And again, the scale is very similar to that's Gough. That's Gough, because Gough has been over to the island of Sicily. That's Gough a couple of years ago. So what we're going to do is a little bit of a backdrop. We're going to look at a Roman theatre. And this is actually the Roman theatre at Magna, Grisha, the great Greek city, again on the island of Sicily. So we've sort of given you a tiny little bit of prehistoric stuff. We know we've got these chambers, and then the biggest throw to claim, then coming into away from the prehistoric period, is something that is very enigmatic. The word Phoenician. So what we do find, giving the origins and giving the basis for lots of these locations on the island would be Phoenician towns and villages, and obviously Phoenician towns and villages would undoubtedly be alongside the coast, just like this Phoenician site of Mocha, which is also on Sicily, which has been clearly excavated. So obviously we've got these remains of the Phoenician site. Now, whenever you look at the word Phoenician, archaeologists can't really give you strict answers how long the Phoenicians have been around. Some say that the Phoenicians were those people that picked up the mantle from the Minoans, because we know the Phoenicians have been around for quite some time. And then we come across the word Phoenicians in regards to that period in about 1,100 odd years ago, when we talk about the collapse of lots of different nations, and we talk about the sea people and all the rest of it. We mentioned the sea peoples then. I think the date was about 1180 or somewhere like that. So BC. So we mentioned the Phoenicians then, and when the Phoenicians seem to get really big, and there's a link with Britain on this one, when the Phoenicians get really big in about the 750s, they're really big on the island of Sicily. Now the Phoenicians are a naval empire, right? They're a naval empire. They're a naval people, and when we talk about a naval people, their evidence is spread from Spain along the coast, all the way to Sardinia, little bits in Africa, all the way some of the Greek islands, probably a little bit of Cyprus, Sicily as well, and all the way over to the Levant places where you've got Damascus and Jerusalem, but they never ever went to make empires inland, so they weren't really massively coming into conflict with people. Well, they obviously were at times, but they weren't into sort of going into the landscape of the Babylonians and so on. So what we do, we have Phoenician settlements like this one at Motia on Sicily, and then they leave the telltale signs of civilization for another civilization to start to get big. And that civilization that starts to get big is in fact the Greek civilization, Magna Grisha. So if we go back to that image itself, this is actually Roman remains that you're actually showing on your screen. But these Roman remains that you're actually looking at on your screen, these are actually based on a Greek colony. Now, one site that I want us to look at is not Syracuse, when you've got a Greek colony that's eventually attacked by the Romans and all the rest of it. We're not going to do that one, but there's a specific site that we're going to look at that was leveled to the ground 409 BC, and just under 2,500 years ago. And that site that we're going to actually look at is one of those sites that shows the very terrible side of humanity. We're going to look at the site known as Celonunte on the south coast. And Celonunte is a site that was a wonderful Greek colony. It was a Greek trading post, right? But the people of Celonunte made themselves unpopular with the city of Saugusta, which is also on Sicily. But the allies of these people at the who were anti-Celonunte people were actually the Carthaginians, and the Carthaginians wrote a terrible wrong against this city, which we're going to go on to. Not this one, not the one in front of us, Magna Grisha. But before we actually do that, I just want to give you a little bit of an idea of what's going on. So you've got the Greek world. The Greeks are massive on the island into the 400s, and then we've got the Carthaginians taking over the island. Sicily's argued over between the Carthaginians and the Romans. The Carthaginians are very popular in holding the island in the First Punic War by about 241. Eventually, a Second Punic War. The Italians, the Romans capture the island in 201. But then eventually the Carthaginian world starts to collapse, and that's it. Rome takes over, and then after, rather interesting, this is a stab in the dark. This is a massive stab in the dark, I think the Germans should have tried this in the Second World War, and they would have been very successful. After Roman civilization on the island of Sicily, the Germans ruled the island in 469 to 535 AD. And how they did it? Well, the way they did it was that the way the Germans, the Germanic people, managed to rule Sicily for just under 100 years. They didn't invade Italy, right? So what they did, this is what the Germans should have done, right? They should have invaded France in the Second World War, which they did, and they conquered France. Then they should have invaded Spain, and then got all the way into Africa, and then the Germans would have ended up in Sicily. And that's exactly what happened. No word of a lie. What happened was that as the Western Roman Empire, jokes aside, as the Western Roman Empire, there was an invasion of what's known as the Vandals and the Alans and the Suez people over the River Rhine. In the last days of the year 406. And when they invaded the Western Roman Empire in Gaul, they managed to head all the way down to Spain, Hispania. And the Romans had a bit of a deal with the Vandals. They said, look, we don't need Spain anymore. You can have it as long as you let us keep Gaul, France, right? And then strangely enough, and then the Vandals decided they didn't want to stay in Spain anymore. So they decided to go over to Africa. You can't make this up. Then they decided to go over to Africa. And then when they went into Africa, they thought, right, we can't be arsed staying in Africa anymore. We want to go back home. And the best way of going back home is to actually go via Sicily. So they ended up conquering Sicily. And they stayed in Sicily until the year they got there from 469, and they stayed there about 535 AD. And it's, you can't make it up, can you? So German peoples, this pseudo-German world was established in Sicily, and then finally they were chucked out by Justinian, the great Emperor Justinian of the Byzantines, in the year 535. So this is Justinian the First, who was the Roman, Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Roman Empire, Giza, that wanted to re-establish the great Roman world. So he decided to invade Italy, Sicily, bits of Spain, and the southern bits of France. And he kicked the Vandals out. You can imagine a conversation, can't you? You can imagine, right, between Justinian and the leader of the Vandals, right? I'd say, okay, if you guys want to go home, right, just head north, right, and just keep going, and you've got the Alps, and you'll be back home again. You can imagine a conversation, and in a way, that's exactly what happened, because the Vandals moved themselves away from the island, and they probably ended up going back north, or some of them went to Africa, and then that's it. So basically, the Romans, in a way, the Eastern Roman Empire is in control of Sicily until about 965, if anyone's taken any notes. And then lo and behold, the Arabs take over the island. And why not? It's about time. You've got to give something to the Arabs, haven't you? It's about time they had a bit. So the Arabs were there until 191. And then the massive strange thing about the whole of history is that the Normans invade Sicily. Well, actually, the Normans have already invaded Sicily a little bit earlier. They share Sicily with the Arabs from about 1038. But by 1091, they are the true rulers over the whole of Sicily. That's the Normans. And strangely enough, when you think about the Normans and the Norman conquest, when I was at school, it's almost as if you've got these little group of Normans in sort of northern France, and they want a bit of it. They want a bit of Britain, right? They want a bit of England. So they come over, you know. They kick the Anglo-Saxons out of control, and the Normans control England. But in fact, the Normans controlled a big chunk of Western Europe at that stage, and or they would do. And it's just that thing that the Normans weren't just a small group of people with axes and swords invading Britain. They were a group of people who had massive influence over the Mediterranean. And then eventually the Normans lost control in about 1191, and then you've got the Kingdom of Sicily, and then you've got eventual reunification of Italy under Giuseppe Garibaldi, under the Risorgimento, the Italian Enlightenment in 1860. And yes, it is true. On a visit of Giuseppe Garibaldi in 1859 to London, when he was asked what to do with grapes, that's when the Garibaldi biscuit was invented. And you know what? Some historians tell me that that's fact. Some people say that's an absolute load of a pack of dead cats. But I don't exactly know the truth on that one. It's a very, very unusual area of history, trying to actually put that down into print and try to really, really work out what's going on. So before we actually go on to Celonunte and we look at a Christian shipwreck, or do I do the Christian shipwreck? Oh, right, let's do the Christian shipwreck after the break. So what I want to do is just give you a nice sort of interesting overview. And the nice interesting overview is just a nice bit of text that I've got in front of me, which should be shown on my screen. And I tell you what, flipping it, all these bloody animals I got here, it's like a friggin' farm. Michelle was going to bring the goats back here yesterday. I thought, oh my god, I can't do with not Bobby, Llewellyn and Griffith as well. Flipping it, they'd be on the roof. So right, so when you I'm going to make this little bit of a statement, which is a rather interesting statement. So what I'm going to do, I need to get both my notes on the screen. I need to make that a little bit doodah. Good, excellent. And yeah, I've got everything on the screen that I need. Brilliant. So it's been stated, has it not, that Sicily is an open air museum. That's it. It's an open air museum. Wherever you go on Sicily, you've got archaeology, and because it's an island, they can do that. Because you know, you're not going to get too many people with hatchbacks filling their back of the car full of columns and heading somewhere into Europe to sell them to a rich owner in an Austrian estate somewhere. Because Sicily's an island, it's you know, the archaeology is very well respected and very, very well liked. And I'm sure that you know, if you're at Palermo and you come across a mafia don, I don't think he'd be too happy with you nicking his archaeology. So you'd end up in a suitcase somewhere in the Mediterranean Ocean. So the archaeology is really, really well preserved. And one of the great sites that we're not going to look at is Messina. Great sort of temples at Messina, great agoras and marketplaces, and other archaeology which we're not going to actually do today. But what we do see, one site that I've completely missed out is actually Messina, but very near Messina is actually this piece of archaeology, which is a rather really interesting piece of archaeology. And the reason why we're not doing Messina is we're looking at we're looking at one site that's very, very similar anyway, so I thought I'd leave that to you guys. And it's easy to look up Messina. You know where it is on the map because I showed you. So this is actually known as the Grotta San Teodoro, very near Messina. And this grotto itself is a piece of archaeology that dates back nearly 13,000 years. And the reason why it's so significant, again, looking at the early prehistory, it's a cave that goes back 60 meters. It's full of archaeology, not several meters. There are dozens of meters of build-up of archaeology in the cave. It's just so deep, full of archaeology. It's a time capsule of Mediterranean archaeology on Sicily. And so the natural cave from where it sees down there to the ground level, excluding all the layers that I've just mentioned, is about 20 meters in height. So one massive thing is that we've got evidence of a very early burial in this cave dating back nearly 13,000 years, where the remains of a woman were actually found carefully buried under a layer of clay. She was found in relatively perfect condition. I don't think she was found with the flesh, but she was found in really perfect condition, living into her 40s. And the woman was called Thea, and that's where the cave name comes from. Teodoro, San Theodoro, and this again is giving you another little bit of a backdrop to very early archaeology. And also it says in my notes, it's really difficult to work this out, so this is beyond the remit of normal archaeologists. A few dozen meters from the cave are fossils of hippopotamus and other animals that lived 200,000 years ago in what it was supposed to be a Great Lake basin. So you've got evidence of very early hippopotamuses, not the hippopotamus that I've mentioned, but really early hippopotamuses. So when you look at something like this, you start to get the idea that this is a very rich landscape full of a window into history and archaeology. And very interesting enough, I thought this was really interesting. I've not got an image of that, but that's a shame. Where they've actually found the hippopotamus, they've actually left the remains of a hippopotamus on site. But what they've done, they've built a glass case around it, and you can actually look down and see the hippopotamus actually on site today. Wouldn't that be great? So yeah, you know, it's almost as if you could sit there and think, this is where the hippopotamus died. Wait for it, 200,000 years ago, and it's a glass case protecting it, but it's there on the site. When you go to museums, you get very disconnected from the archaeology. It's in glass cabinets, and you really don't understand it, and you start to think, I can't really understand what's going on. And but when you get a site like this, you can actually there's archaeology for you to see there, the proper archaeology, the nuts and bolts of it. So moving on a little bit. So again, this word archaeological park. There's a number of individual archaeological parks. This is the Naxos Archaeological Park, and this is actually the remains of a very, very early Greek colonial site. again at Naxos, and very sort of Greeky sounding type names. So what's usually happening is that you've got the height of the Phoenicians, and then what you've got is that you've about 750 odd years BC, and then you've got the Greeks settling there, and just the Phoenicians like disappear. They sort of nobody really knows what happened to the Phoenicians, and they just sort of became the people that had absorbed them more than anything. And you've got vast theatres, for example, on Sicily. Great theatres. The Piazza Stesicoro. Piazza Stesicoro. That is a great amphitheatre. So they got lots of great theatres. But one thing that they've got is a beautiful Roman villa. Now, there's a beautiful Roman villa known as the Roman Villa Enna, E-N-N-A. And this is actually a Roman villa that's completely a UNESCO World Heritage Site. UNESCO World Heritage Sites only occur when something's relatively unique, and we will go on to that. We're building up to that. It's the Villa Romana della Casal in Enna, and this was probably an imperial villa. And what we find, is it me or I've got buzzing in my ears? What we find with this imperial villa is, wait for it, there are 300 square. Oh no, I've read that wrong. There are 3.5. No, there's not. There's 3,500 square meters of mosaics. 3,500 square meters of mosaics. Isn't that absolutely amazing? 300 square meters of mosaics is quite chunky. But this is why I deliberately stoned 300 square meters. That's quite a big area, isn't it? But 3,500 square meters of mosaics in individual rooms, and they've guesstimated that's 120 million pieces of tessera. 120 million pieces of tessera. So that's a massive range. So in other words, some of the best mosaic sets in the world are to be found actually at this site. Now, can I just sort of stroll over to something, because yesterday I actually did my Roman class, right? And to sort of give you a bit of a comparison, I did my Roman class at and we looked at Fishborn Roman Villa. And one of the things at Fishborn Roman Villa, if you really want to see mosaics in this country, right, you need to go to Fishborn Roman Villa. We did have a trip to Fishborn planned, but it went Joe West because of the pandemic. So we'll see what will happen to that in the near future. But if I share this now, if you want to see anything similar to this site in Sicily, which has 3,500 square meters of mosaics, this is the place to actually go down to Fishborn, the Roman palace at Fishborn. They got these beautiful mosaics. So what you can see on the right hand side with Sicily, which it's saying this is probably an imperial palace, an imperial villa for the Roman royal family, or there's a certain enough members of the Roman royal family. There's talk of various Roman emperors going into retirement, and this is where they would go. In other words, at knife edge, you can either die or you could go to retirement to Sicily, and they might end up here. So it's good. They might write their novels, and that would be it. So this wonderful world that we actually see at Sicily. If you want to see anything close to that, you actually go to the Fishborn Roman Villa in this country. So what you do have is there's one little important point I'd like to make with this. So you've got the most famous mosaic is the La Ragazza in bikini. So in other words, the girls, ragazza, girl, bikini, the girls in bikinis playing ball or competing in other sports. And this itself, I think this is rather this is the type of bikini that women wear today. Instead of wearing the sort of bra top that women wear, they have a tendency to wear these tops now. I know my daughter has, and this design is the same design that they would have worn 2,000 years ago. So nothing much has changed, except I'm sure that woman on the left, she's very muscular. She'd give Gough a run for her money. Flippin' heck. She'd be very dominant. So, in other words, this type of scene like this brings people very into reality. It's almost as if there's a 3D nature to this one single mosaic in itself. Are the 100 mosaics that make up this sort of villa, and you can see that sort of it sort of echoes, and it's sort of there's a 3D nature of this. And I think it's great that this is so modern. It's just such a modern design, and very athletic, very outstanding design. And if you want to look this up, this is for Reginald. Look up the Roman villa of Del Casal, which is this one, and look up the mosaic of the cubicle of the erotic scene. I noticed you just wrote that down, Keith, quickly. So when you look at that one, that's another one from this villa. I didn't want to take too much away. Now, something else unusual is this. Have you ever seen anything as strange as this? This itself is actually one of the monumental works at a site known as Morgantina. And this itself, you've got a theatre-like structure at Morgantina, and it's I've never seen anything like this. You've always got them sort of semicircular or sort of oblong shaped. Nothing like this one. Very, very odd site. And again, what they do with the archaeology of Sicily over the many centuries, they've actually created the archaeology into the wonderful natural landscape that is in fact Sicily itself. So then what we want to do then is move. It's got museums upon museums on Sicily as well. Isn't that a great sort of marble? And again, this is actually what you've got is you've got the wonderful site of Morgantina, and then alongside it you've got a museum as well. So this is one of the statues in the museum itself, and you've got this wonderful. Hang on a minute. Oh God, where's Oh, I'm gonna have to show you the other image on the other screen. This is the head of AD, a Greek god. So I'm going to show you this one now on the which will be coming up. Sharing the screen. Job done. Oh, doesn't that look great? The piercing eyes of a Greek god, and it's almost as if those lips could speak, they would be a foregiver of doom, I'm sure. You know, it's sort of, his top lip is down to quiver. It's almost as if he's going to tell us off, Keith. So I don't think we'll hang around for him to tell us off. It's almost as if those eyes are going to be deeply open, from being white to sort of the pupil eyes. And you've got the... I think what is interesting is the style of beard and the hair. And this is sort of typical Greek. This is sort of typical Macedonian in style. This is sort of typical Eastern in style. And again, what we do, we have, in a way, what we do see on the island of Sicily is that we have a representation of the Mediterranean world in one moment. And then somebody shouted out on Tuesday, they shouted out, they said, oh, what about mining? And I said, hang on a minute, I haven't even got to that. Do you really expect me to get to all of this? What about trade? Okay, yes. The reason why Sicily is so great is because of trade. And do you know what? The island, one thing that we actually do find, that there's a reference in the Arabian dominated Sicilian world, that they actually had one market area that had 150 butcher shops with 2,000 butchers in just sort of one sort of marketplace. 2,000 butchers, and you're thinking, mind my French, bloody hell, how many animals have they got on the island to keep those butchers busy day in, day out? I know they're Muslim butchers and are going to have to go to prayer 5 times a day, but it's still a lot of animals to have to butcher and to compete. So what you're talking about is Sicily is not just an interchange of mineral trading goods, and it's also a massive trader of dressed stone as well, as will come in when we look at the shipwreck as well. So we've got that, and we've got the agricultural wealth, the bountiful barley and the bountiful other crops that are growing, olives, and then what we've obviously got herds and herds of heads of cattle and sheep and goat and all the rest of it. So a very, very rich world indeed. And when you think about it, this idea of a very, very rich world is very much that we see with other island people. I know we've mentioned the Phoenicians who dominate this world before the Greeks. So just under 3,000 years ago, if we want to go to the height 750 years BC. But it's almost as if when we look before that, you look at the Minoan example that would have probably visited this island and traded with the people of this island back 3,600 years ago. But it's almost as it seems that island people can be a little bit more put together, a little bit more savvy than landlocked people. And actually, for once, I'm going to use the British Empire in a good light. This is how the British Empire became so great, because it was an island nation. And the example is when we look towards Sicily. The reason why Sicily was so successful, because it was an island nation. And it could, again, the people of Crete and so on. Cyprus hasn't been as massively as successful an island nation as it always seems to be invaded and things that go bump in the night on Cyprus. But Cyprus had its copper throughout the ages, and is a very, very wealthy land as well. This is the Greek theatre housed in the hollow of a hill overlooking the Sea of Syracuse. I thought we'd mentioned Syracuse is hollowed out of the mountainside at Syracuse, and it was immediately known for its works. Its ability in regards to architecture and obviously the statuary in regards to representations of women and representations of Persians. So there's lots of statuary associated with the site as well. Again, trying to do a whole island like this with so much diverse archaeology is seemingly impossible, and it is impossible for me to try and even do today, but we're just scratching upon the surface. Look at this. This is known as Dionysio's ear. Dionysio's ear. A funnel-shaped artificial cave carved into limestone. It's about 23 meters high. I'd say a bit higher than that, actually. And it is vaguely reminds people when they look at this of an ear. It's 65 meters in depth. And talking about music, if you want an exceptional, a natural, acoustical location, if you say echo, it amplifies it 16 times, a 16 times amplified echo. So if you said Keith, it will go Keith. So it's actually a bit louder than that and more in a sort of extreme way. So in a way, this is sort of the bowels of society, the bowels of understanding, and everything is to be seen on the island of Sicily, the great diverse Mediterranean Sea. And I missed the point earlier on. I mentioned the word Phoenicians. I mentioned the Phoenician world, and when I mentioned the Phoenician world, I wanted to say that there's actually a link between Phoenicia and Great Britain, because it was the Phoenicians who first traded our tin around the Mediterranean. So the Phoenicians were the first to come across our tin and to take it to the Mediterranean to then mix with copper, and tin and copper makes bronze, and obviously you've got zinc. You've got the islands. You've got zinc as well. So zinc and copper is going to make brass. So and the other thing as well is this sounds a bit odd, but I'm going to say it. I wish I'd have remembered to pick up the image, but there's an image from Sicily of this great bronze statue still lying on the ground near a temple. And you're thinking, over here, that would have either been taken away by a Barry scrap merchant or it'd be in a museum somewhere. But the fact of the matter is, it's just lying on the surface for all to see. This great bronze statue. A spread eagle on the floor as it collapsed alongside a temple. And you could only get that on somewhere like the island of Sicily. So, oh God, this is definitely wearing me out. So, and actually, I could take a nice little break now because I've been rabbiting on for quite some time. But we're going for a little bit. We're going for a little bit longer, and this is rather interesting. This is known as the let me get the name. The Cave de Ispica. The Cave de Ispica. Now this is rather interesting because this one, all these here, are actually for burials. These are actually rock cut burials. So I don't think you would run along here because without a torch, but you can imagine that it would have been slabs sealing the tops of these, like in a modern day cathedral where under the ground you've got a big slab and underneath cutting into the rock or the earth down below you've got a sarcophagi and so on. So this is what this is, and I think this is, I've never seen anything like this before. What you do, something like this, you go along a passageway and you actually sort of, what you do see is on in your walls you've got various places, various niches where you put sarcophagi, but not on the floor like this. This is really, really interesting, really different. And again, a different way of burial, just sort of along a passageway as a modern day cathedral would display its wonderful wares. Now this, oh God, there's temples delight. This is why I was very careful not to look at Messina. I just looking at this is at Agrigento. And when I talk about some of the best preserved Greek archaeology on the planet, and now let's take a breath. I can't, because here's the valley of the impressive Valley of the Temples, Agrigento. This temple in front of us is and this landscape, archaeological landscape, is one of the most important sets of archaeological landscapes associated with the Greek world anywhere on the planet. This is the largest and most well-preserved set of Greek remains to be found anywhere, and 1998 became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. I don't know why UNESCO just didn't go to Sicily and say, we'll just make the whole thing a UNESCO World Heritage Site. I'm sure the Sicilians wouldn't have minded at all, because you know, it's a large island, and you know they make a lot of money from the archaeology. So there you go. That temple in front of us on a rocky ridge, you will find the ruins of some Doric temples, and this one itself, there's some of the Doric temples, 120 odd centimeters in length, associated with the gods and goddesses of Hera, Concordia, Hercules, Zeus, Castor, Pollux, and Hephaestus. That one, Hephaestus. Yeah, that's a nice one. So you've got all this, and I think this is the Temple of Concordia, and it's still standing. The site that we are going to go to after the break, the ones that you see there, most of that has been reconstructed, but this hasn't. This is just there. It's beautiful. And again, if you want to see Greece, don't go to Greece, go to Sicily, and that's where you're going to find many of these joys and subtleties of this world. On that note, I'm really starting to feel it. I haven't finished this little bit, so I'm going to actually take a break. So I'm actually going to warn you, I'm going to have to take a coffee after this. So I'm going to see, are there any questions? Come on, you boys and girls.
What was that? You showed us a cavey thing a couple of images ago. What was that actually for? Was it? You said it was man-made.
No, it's a natural cave, but that cave itself has got evidence going back to 13,000. Oh no, the one that looked like an ear.
Yeah, the ear.
Oh right, yeah. No, it's a natural. It's natural.
All right.
It's a natural cave. That one, yeah. The ear one, yeah. That is actually a natural cave, and you know, I looked at it when I was originally looking at the images. I thought that looks like man-made. It looks like this actually. It actually looks like there's stonework in there, but it wasn't. It's actually not man-made. Obviously, they must have. They may have actually helped carve some of it out over the years, but wonders will never know and wonders will never cease. And maybe if you were going to do the 7 world natural ancient wonders, that should probably be chucked into it alongside Goth. Talking about natural wonders, Goth, is there anything you'd like to give us? I know you've been into the harbour at Syracuse and Messina and so on, but other than that, anything you'd like to say?
When I think of Sicily, I think of Stromboli.
Stromboli.
Yeah.
Stromboli. Say that again.
Yeah. So no questions. No, it's very interesting.
I'm glad. And Etna itself, we there's no real mention of Etna today, but obviously you've got an island that is full of volcanic tremors and seismic activity. And you think that lots of this archaeology would be well destroyed by now, but then again, if you want to look at Vesuvius in regards to Herculaneum, even though that's all buried, we've still got the remains for everybody to see today. So, Arnold.
No questions as yet.
As yet. Oh God, that sounds ominous. Janie Bainey. Jane.
No questions, but you've sold it to me for a holiday.
No, that's because we're going there together. I haven't sold it to you. We're going there together, love. You and me. Adrian can stay behind with Michelle moaning, and that'll be fine. She wouldn't forgive me. Mind you, she wouldn't want to go anyway because she doesn't like foreigners. She can't stand anyone outside Wales. Right, anyway, Chris.
No, thanks, Carl. It's very interesting. I have been through the Straits of Messina on a boat, but that's as close as I've got. Or on a ship, I should say. Not
that counts. That counts. That does count. Talking about oh God, sorry, I do apologise, Goff. We got to put up with the numpties now. Go for it. Right, numpties. If there's anything you want to say, go on.
We're offended.
We're not answering to that.
No, I don't think we've got anything to say other than we're offended.
Well, there's nothing wrong with being a numpty. Keith is a numpty and he does pretty well out of it.
Humpty Numpty, me.
Numpty, Numpty, Dumpty.
Numpty, 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 Dumpty Doo. Right, so does anyone want to order my book? If so, you know what to do. So we can get it to you next week. So there you go.
Yeah, special discount for us, isn't it?
Yeah, 14 quid. Right, okay then, good. Right. Okay, so we'll have a break now. We'll have a break for a good 10 whatever minutes, and we'll go from there. Good.
Okay.
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 It was a strange transition because originally what happened was that on the Rhine frontier between the Roman Empire in as early as the 300s, the people beyond the Rhine frontier were saying that we got pressure from tribes further east. You know, can we come into the Roman Empire? And the Romans constantly said no. And there were Roman statesmen who said, look, this would be a good idea because, you know, if we can befriend them now, you know, we actually need people in the empire. And then eventually with great pressure in 406, the Rhine froze over. It was so cold, the Rhine froze over. So the Romans couldn't stop them anymore. They just walked across. There was no stopping them. There was a lot of resistance to them settling. But what happened that what happened was that eventually, when they did settle in the Roman Empire, they were asked to settle in Spain. And when they settled in Spain, it was known as Vandals Spain. When I was working on Spain, it was a very strange thing because one minute we were working on Roman, then it was Vandal archaeology. Basically, there weren't massive. There weren't tens of millions of Vandals. There were a few tens of thousands of them, and it was just an ethnic grouping of people that seemed to be more than one ethnic grouping of people, and then they ended up in Africa. They went all the way down to Carthage, and it's a very strange phenomenon because these Germanic people wouldn't have been used to the weather conditions, and this isn't over tens of thousands of years that they evolved. This is over a few years that all these changes occurred. So I can't imagine people from Germany who are the same people wanting to live in Africa, but then they move from Africa back into Sicily, and then it's no word of a joke that then when Justinian turned up in 535, he basically said, right, you can just go back home now, and it's likely that lots of them would have just moved up through Italy and then back to Germany.
All right, great, interesting, very
It's
interesting.
it's just as simple as that, really, but it sounds
Yeah.
more complicated.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
It's not very widely known, but we were able to trace their route down through France and Spain and Africa and into Sicily, because everywhere they went, they left their towels behind on the deck chairs.
Shut up, you stupid man. If you want me to be really crude, I will, but I'm going to keep that after these biscuits. Yeah, I always used to remember when I was in Rhodes, right, there were these women who used to bathe naked, and they used to have the most biggest in the world ever.
Biggest what?
I'm not going to say any more. Okay.
No imagination.
Okay, their breasts were voluptuous.
There's not a lot you can say to that.
No, there isn't. That's done it dead, hasn't it? You know. I might be having a little phone call part way through I start. So when I do, it'll only be for a couple of minutes, but we're going to get started again anyway. So I am a little bit more refreshed.
Good.
I had to go and feed Bernard his grapes because he's a grape-eating turkey.
Oh,
And
that's a good taste of the meat, that.
shut up, you stupid man.
Save on the stuffing, I suppose, wouldn't it, come Christmas?
Oh, yeah, ready stuffed.
Already stuffed.
You guys are really sick. Oh,
Come on, get on with it.
You roasted or barbecuing?
oh, I tell you what, Michelle would have your guts for garters. She really would. My God, do you know what, right? She actually apologised to me the other day for being miserable. Women don't apologise for anything. Do you know what I mean? Keith, have you ever heard of a woman apologising to you for anything?
No, certainly not. I mean, and their natural state is miserable.
Yeah, exactly. Just, you know. So, is it a first that a woman's actually apologised to me? Is that the first ever in history?
I'd record it in your notebook.
Yeah, I am. You know what, right? I'm going to write it down. Michelle apologised. Because it'll be the first and the last.
And get her to sign it, because she won't admit it in a week's time.
Oh, no, she won't. Oh, no. Whenever anything goes wrong, right? I remember we had this sort of heated discussion about the paint in the room. She said, no, I've always hated that colour, but you said to paint it. No, I didn't. I never told you to paint that colour. I told you to paint it the other colour. And I just thinking, I just can't win.
No, just give up before you even start. That's the best way.
I even bought the tin of paint, even though I don't buy any tins of paint. Do you know what I mean? So, right. Anyway, so we're back to it now, and I just trying to get back into the flow of things, which is going to be slightly awkward. This is the statue of Arriga di Marzia, and basically this is in the this is associated with this is associated with another museum display amongst the various museums, and this is associated with being a representation at Marsala of a Phoenician. Now, one thing I wanted to do just before the break, I wanted to look at a shipwreck, but I didn't have enough time, and we just completely run out of time, actually. There was this thing about shipwrecks. Now, I've been looking into the shipwrecks, and I found one shipwreck amongst the thousands off the coastline of Sicily. Now, naturally, Sicily is going to be a coastal landscape of shipwrecks. So obviously what we do find is cabinets and cabinets in their museums. This is at their museum known as the Antiquarium. The Antiquarium. Not the aquarium, the Antiquarium, which I think is a great name for a museum. The Antiquarium. We're going to go to the Antiquarium. And one interesting thing, what they've done in the vaults of this castellated building that they've converted into a museum. If you look at that, in the museum, they've excavated a whole shipwreck, and they've re-erected a shipwreck as it's meant to be seen in the Antiquarium Museum. And what you can clearly see is lots of the amphora. And I do believe that these are roughs of columns, because, you know, part of their trade was, in fact, not only amphora, not only meat, cut stone, and also columns themselves for various buildings to be erected around the Mediterranean Sea. So then what I did sort of with the introduction, and I just sort of said, look, there's lots of sort of castellated museums, the Castello Grifo Museum, this one here. And then this will lead us nicely into the next piece of where I want to go. This is associated with the Gala Gade, which is a cargo shipwreck. This is clearly not from the Roman period. This is clearly from more recent times. But what I would like now to do is to go on to this nice little nautical archaeological piece. We don't do nautical archaeology enough. It's known as the Mazzamimi shipwreck. So it's the Mazzimi shipwreck. So what I'm going to do is actually share this article to you guys, and which would be appropriate, so you can actually understand the context of what I'm saying. So Mazzamimi shipwreck. So I'm just warning you again. I'm expecting a call for a few moments. But that's not yet. So the Marzamimi shipwreck, moving Christian architecture for Justinian's empire. Basically, they found a shipwreck that off the coast of Sicily, dating to the 500s, probably around the late 530s actually. And they used to rough up and dress whole churches, like flat plaque churches, and these churches would be shipped around the Mediterranean Sea. So all they had to do is to put them all together. So they found this 2017, and this Serpentine, they excavated in 2017, I should say, the Serpentine Tangle of water dredges and fire hoses, anchored with concrete blocks and partially suspended with air-filled buckets, is key to current underwater excavation. And there they are working on the shipwreck. There's lots of there's lots of coral around. In 1959, a local fisherman searching for cuttlefish in the shallow waters, 8 meters down, off the coast of southeast Sicily, spotted several carved stone blocks nestled among the rocks, reefs and sand about a kilometre from the coastal port of Marzamimi. And I'm sure Goff has been there. An archaeological expedition set out to investigate. To everybody's surprise, the blocks comprise distinctive architectural fragments, including an intricately carved pulpit designed for a late antique church. When we're talking about a late antique church, an early stone church. Now more than half a century later, a new archaeological project, 2017, is again piecing together these mysterious finds and the ship that carried them. So again, an IKEA flat-packed church on board a ship, ready to be erected somewhere in the Mediterranean. In those early underwater expeditions, they identified marble columns, capitals, bases scattered across a wide area, with still more pieces lying beneath the sand. Certain other objects were sculptured with religious iconography, and more appeared unfinished. So there was a few roughs there as well. So carved Ambo pulpit panels And this again is basically clear evidence that they're flat packing churches around the Mediterranean. This late antique church wreck, that's what they call it, belongs to the period that saw the Emperor Justinian I, the one who reconquered the island for Rome in 535, embarked on an enthusiastic program of church building to renew both what remained of the Roman Empire and the centrality of its Christian practice. So that's really interesting, the last bit there. And I would like to mention as well, I wanted to chuck this in there, next Friday I'm out in the evening for an hour and a half. 7:30 we're doing a history walk, an archaeology and ghost walk of Llantwit Major, and you can find out where Sluts Lane is in Llantwit Major. We finally found it. There's a lane in Llantwit Major used to be called Sluts Lane. So anyone interested, the reason why I mention that is because an early church in Llantwit Major, and if anyone's interested, stay on at the end and let me know if you want to come along. And I'll even bring some eggs along for you. Wonderful, Jim. So anyway, back to this, the centrality of the Christian practice. So in other words, but that point, Christianity was Rome and Rome was Christianity in regards to the Eastern Roman Empire, the Greek Orthodox Roman Empire based at Constantinople, and Ravenna for a little time as well, which is northern Italy. Underwater archaeology was in its infancy in the 1960s. But the pioneering investigations on Sicily put the site on the map and paved the way for more intensive research. 2013, Stanford University and the Soprintendenza del Mare picked up where the work had left off. So the Marzia ship lies 8 meters deep at the base of a steep reef. Higher modern sea levels obscure the fact that in antiquity, the top of this reef would have been just over a metre from the sea surface. So obviously, water levels still rising in the Roman period. Perhaps the ship's crew judging the depth of the shallow water at this point, ran aground. The ship sank, toppling down the bank of the reef before coming to rest on the seabed. A whole church is lost. A church at sea. There's a song about that, isn't there? Anyway. The shallow depth also exposes the site to strong weather, particularly during winter, when shifting sands uncover and recover objects. Even large column pieces have moved on occasion. Moreover, the region is prone to tectonic activity, and there are reports of dynamite fishing in the area, both of which almost certainly contributed to the collapse in places of the soft reef onto parts of the site. So in other words, all the archaeology is dotted everywhere. It's great. Anyway, however, we have enough clues to give us an idea of the vessel's original layout on the seabed. So you know, there's so much really going on. There's so much going on in regards to shipwreck. While sand can be moved fairly briskly from the site, this entangling large and sometimes eroded elements from rocks and reef is an arduous and precise task. Slowly excavating through, around and under this complex jumble is key to understanding, for example, when large pieces of column became wedged under boulders where small objects may have trickled down through the reef and shifting sands, and how all these finds can be woven back together into a narrative about the ship, its journey and its broader world. And in fact, sort of putting the church together, really, that would be great. So using all sort of new sort of stereo photography to sort of try and understand what's going on with there, and continue to excavate the site, understanding the reconstruction and original deposition. I think it's an absolutely amazing find, and more to see in future times. And it's just basically saying that a reconstruction of a Byzantine church with a pulpit and ambo in the centre. So there it is. You can imagine me preaching there, couldn't you? Dear fellow archaeologists, I may give you the wonders of the archaeological world. And talking about the wonders of the archaeological world, I haven't actually told you what we're doing next week. So we haven't exactly finished yet. We're going to do the last piece of the jigsaw that I wanted to do today. So next week, we're going to actually be doing the early medieval period part 2. So when I mentioned last time, I mentioned, if I may take a note for myself, the early medieval period. We'll be looking at the site at Dinas Powys, we'll be looking at Glastonbury, and we may actually be looking at Caerleon. So we'll be looking at those 3 sites, trying to give you an early medieval tent. And then we're back to the archaeology of the world the following week. So right, let's crack on. So what I need to do is I need to get back to where my images were. And if we move on, we're going to be going to... Voila! Celonunte. So what I'm going to do is close all my images up on the screen so I know what I'm doing and everything's nice and happy. And right and good. Why am I looking at Prince Edward's going to lead the armed forces? I don't know. Right, okay, so here we go, and there, Celonunte, the wonderful site of Celonunte. Now, this was going to be what I was going to base the whole talk on today, to be honest. And I decided to do the whole of Sicily. And basically what they've got is 2 reconstructed temples at the Celonunte site, a 250-acre set of archaeology. Around 15% of the original city survives above ground level, collapsed buildings and so on. So before I sort of go on next, I just want to show you this image. This is they've got 2 areas where the temples have been reconstructed. They've got part of one temple, and then the other side they've got the Acropolis. So let's just sort of show you where we're sort of looking at. So there we go, Celonunte. So you're looking at these columns. There are 2 temples at this site. At the Acropolis site, there are 5 temples. One of those temples have been more or less completely reconstructed, and this temple itself has been partly reconstructed. You can see that what we do know, 500 years ago, there was a huge earthquake associated with Etna, and all of these, it all went into a site of complete desolation, where you've got these temples everywhere. So this is a site at the Acropolis site at Celonunte. And let's sort of give you a little bit of background. Celonunte, it's a population of there was a great sort of foundation of a city being founded there in the 600 years BC. By about 609, the city was now to be deserted. So this is the thing, what's happening with this site, Celonunte. It's a site that probably associated with the Phoenicians. It's got lots of harbours, and that's what's going on. And basically, what happened with Celonunte is the downside of this. The reason why it was more or less completely deserted by 409, slightly reoccupied for 100 odd or so years, and completely deserted for all time, is that basically the people of Celonunte some years earlier defeated the Carthaginians in battle with other people as well, and by around 409, the people of the city of Segestan were at war with the Celonunte people, and they asked the Carthaginians for help. Carthaginians, wanting blood revenge, decided to lay siege to the city of Celonunte with 100,000 men, and laid it to complete waste. It's likely that 16,000 people were slaughtered in the streets. 5,000 people went into slavery, and just 2,500 people actually survived. And basically, shortly, few years later, the great general Hannibal had the city's walls leveled, and it could never ever be used again. And then, so what I do is give you, that's a little bit of an overview, which I've done too soon, but I've got a little bit more information about that sort of great disaster. So if I sort of share, have that on my screen there, so we don't have too much going on, and that there, and here we go. So this is described as one of in my headlines here. It says one of the ancient world's greatest tragedies, frozen in time for almost 2,500 years, is at last yielding up its long secrets. Like the site of Naxos, for example, that we also looked at, which was completely abandoned, and you could actually say Petra, that's abandoned as well. There's lots of these abandoned cities out there that were never sort of used again, utilised. Unlike somewhere like Rome, where you've got so many layers of archaeology in Greece that you can't really get an idea of what earlier worlds were like. But this landscape is a real good demonstration of what a Greek city looked like, without anybody mucking around with it later on. So it could be described as being like a Pompeii of the south in a way. And I'll give you I'll share this on the screen as well, just sort of this little image quickly, alongside the temple. Back in the city itself, what we do find is whole furnaces like this, bread ovens and various furnaces, and shop fronts. And what we do find is, like Pompeii, we have half digested meals that are still on the table as the city's being attacked. And you have wine and all the rest of it, and still there, not used, and all the buildings are burnt down. So we have massive destruction. And they say that if you look at those tiles in front of you with that building on the left, you can actually see the scorch marks of the original timber as it collapsed from the ceiling. And the reason why that's slightly blackened is that's where the timber would have actually burnt as the city is being torched by the Carthaginians. So again, going back to my notes and looking at this wonderful temple at Pompeii, all the houses and other buildings were interred almost instantly under volcanic ash. At Celonunte, lots of the buildings in the city were completely abandoned after 409. Bits of it were reoccupied by the Carthaginians for a short period of time, and that's it. And then the whole city's, instead of being covered by ashes, is actually covered by tons and tons of earth and windblown sand. So archaeological excavations are now revealing how the exact moment that Celente ceased to exist as a major living city was preserved in graphic detail. Now, what we're seeing with the reconstruction in that image there is that has actually been reconstructed. Most of that's been reconstructed. As you can see over there, bits of the temples did actually survive this sort of volcanic sort of the thermal shock of the tremors caused by Etna 500 years ago. I just think that most of the city would have been still standing 500 years ago, deserted, completely deserted. So buried under the collapsed roofs within these buildings were the tragedy of the townsfolk, half-eaten remains of meals abandoned alongside those townsfolk as they burnt to death, and dozens of bowls that's described left around hearths, half-eaten. What's more, the archaeologists have also found dozens of unfired ceramic pots and tiles abandoned by terrified local workers before they had had a chance to put them in their kilns. So this is the tragedy. They had no idea that this Carthaginian attack was coming. That the small army was nothing to try and put up with the Carthaginian attack. So what we're doing now, over the past sort of 50 odd years, the Sicily's been excavated. It was untouched by, as far as I know, it was untouched by Mussolini's archaeologists. However, if Mussolini had sided with the Allies in the Second World War, I'm sure that much more would have actually been reconstructed on Sicily, and much more would be available to see today. But that's, alas, the echoes of wrongnesses in history. What we do have associated with the coast is, like many of these cities on Sicily, they would have been reliant upon harbourage. This is the area where you've got the two temples, which I'll show you all. So you've got these two temples here, which are outside the main Acropolis precinct, where you've got 5 temples. And going around the outside, this 250-acre site, you've got this ditch. Okay, and around the Acropolis, it's got its own wall. So you've got a ditch running, and you've got another inner wall as well, which flows all the way down beyond, up, back again, and I do believe there's another wall around the outside, because this ditch actually clearly continues. And again, this is an archaeological park. It cannot be touched. Naturally, if this was in Britain, for example, in Wales, I'm sure they would have put a motorway through it today, even if it was archaeologically protected. But the Italians on Sicily really absolutely love their archaeology. They're really, really, really so proud of it, because it's their origins, it's who they are, it's their identity. They're an island people, and lots of island people want to sort of shout out and say, you know, this is who we are. So what we've got with Celonunte is a site that is a classical Greek city. We're able to understand what a classical Greek city looked like before anyone's interfered with it. Whatever the Carthaginians did, they didn't do a lot to disturb the city that they had captured. They sort of occupied little bits of it, the harbourage area, not the rest of the city. You know, previously what we did actually think with an ancient Greek city was limited, because when you look at Athens, you have a temple, you have a modern street, you have a temple, you have a Roman street, you have a temple, you have something from the 1700s. With Celonunte, around most of the site is being more or less completely untouched. So it's a bit of it's an absolute gem. So what we're actually starting to do is, by looking at the Celonunte site itself, and you can actually get this wonderful aerial view where you've got these temples in a row, and what we do have, you have the streets and the vista going out with the entrance. You've got the sort of entrance into this complex, and you've got little sort of theatres as well. You know, when I one of the things that I usually say, that's part of the temple that's sort of been reconstructed there. Okay, and I'd be a bit of a correction. The Acropolis site has got the 5 built temples at the Acropolis site, where you've got the one partly reconstructed, and then the other site that we've just mentioned has got the fully reconstructed temple. So there's just a little bit of an error there, sorry. So what we do find is that when these sites are being excavated, they leave big piles of dressed stone for the reconstruction work. This is why I mentioned this before, this is why lots of sites, in regards to sites that have been excavated that got temples, you've got little bits of dressed stone hanging around for people to maybe re-erect future occasions when they want to do further reconstruction stages of this city. It's quite possible, may I add, if the money was put into this site, which the Sicilians do a very good job. Sicilians do a better job of their archaeology than the rest of the Italian government with places like Pompeii. If the Sicilians put their money together, they could probably reconstruct the whole site of Celonunte with the material that's actually lying around. So, you know, they could probably quite easily do it without much cast concrete. So, so nobody knows exactly at this stage, because we've probably only investigated about 15% of the 250 acres. Nobody has really been able to understand the numbers of houses here. So the population with the city is anywhere deemed to be 30,000 plus. This is what the figure was in about 409 from the figures that we've got, but it's probably a lot larger than that, probably coming up to about 50,000, but it's a very large, they're basically the size of Barry, and Barry's quite a big sprawl. This is probably about 30 to 50,000 people, a little bit more congested into at this time as well, in the Greek period, in the Roman period, we're coming into the idea of sort of multi-story buildings, sort of flat-like buildings as well. So this is what we're coming into. So what we're seeing is that we've got a city where you've got the civilian and you've got the religious, the economic. It's all very well preserved. I just want to show you this next image. So Celonunte we've only been really starting to reconstruct Celonunte in the last in this century, actually, not in the last century, in the more 50-60 years, and they've done a really good job of reconstruction. So if I actually show you this image in front of me here now, so we'll do that one. That is a really good piece of reconstruction, and you know they've not done they've not done any disservices. And one thing about the reconstruction they've actually done, the stuff that's been the stuff that's used modern materials is clearly looking like it's used modern materials. That's really good for an archaeologist like me. What's very frustrating is when you go to an archaeological site and you're saying, well, bloody hell, what's actually reconstructed and what isn't. I get really frustrated with that, and it's clear. I like the way they've actually done that, and they've done a really good, really nice dress job of that. They really have. So there we go. So that quote itself, which I can actually show you. Celonunte is the only classical Greek city where the entire metropolis, the entire landscape, the hinterland, is preserved, mainly buried under sand and earth, and we got the 15%, which is above level, to give you an idea. It is therefore gives us a unique opportunity to discover how an ancient Greek city functioned. You know, this is an absolute gem, and sort of it's a much more of a microcosm of archaeology over a large area, if you know what I'm talking about. Excavations at the site are now uncovering pottery kilns and workshops complete with pottery making equipment and even the pigments used to paint the pots. You know, the biggest question is what I get in archaeology is, how did they make these things? How did they do them? What processes did they use? And you know what? It's all laid out on a table in front of you. Well, not a proper wooden table, but it's all smashed on the floor and it's in front of you as the buildings were set alight in 409 BC. So we've got a precise date, a precise moment in time when things ended, a precise moment in time when that pottery was being created, a bit like the level that you see with the Samian pottery manufacturing kilns that you actually see in France. We know where all the Samian stuff in Britain's from by finding those sort of great furnaces and stuff in France. So 80 kilns, pottery kilns and bread making kilns and all the rest of it. 80 kilns have actually been found, circular kilns, and a dozen large rectangular ones dedicated to producing giant ceramic food storage containers. And guess what? Ceramic coffins. So it'd be really interesting to see the burial area, just to get an idea of the coffins. Let the people stay in them. Let the human remains stay in those coffins. Let's have a little look at some of those coffins and how those actual coffins worked out. So sort of there were various smaller kilns for tableware, loom weights, and creating small statues for various gods. And it's again said that the potters even had their own religious chapels equipped with altars dedicated to special working deities. They had the Athena god of workers and Artemis god of hunting and childbirth, and temples, little household temples associated with Demeter, goddess of fertility and the harvest. Harvest would have been absolutely massive to the island as well, as I've already mentioned, and even little sort of household temples to Zeus himself. So the Archaeology of Sicily is unique, and it's down to its tragedy at the hands of the Carthaginians that we actually see the archaeology presented to us today. So what I'd like to do is a sort of last homage to Celonunte, and what we're going to do, I've got a nice little entry from Britannia that I'm actually going to share on the screen. You don't always need to go to Wikipedia. There's actually Britannica. You know, those old volumes that they used to sell door to door, Britannica. I like the entries that I'm finding in Britannica these days because they've been really well researched by experts. So Britannica is the source to go to if you just want a little bit of a snapshot of a fact, and that's what we're going to go to. Little fact associated with Celonunte in connection. Selinus, Greek, Selenos. Selinus actually means celery in ancient Greek, celery. Selinus, basically it's the city of the celery, and what we do find on their coins is representations of the celery leaf, the wild celery leaf. An ancient Greek city, 8 miles on the south coast of Sicily. What does that? 8 miles? Oh no, sorry, 8 miles on the south coast. Yeah, so sorry, I read that wrong. On the southern coast of Sicily, and it's near the modern city of Castelvetrano. It is famous for its ruined Doric temples. As I said, there's two they've reconstructed there. One in the the one that you can actually see there on. Oh, you haven't got the two screens, so just put the two screens up there. That's in the Acropolis area, and obviously the full one that they've reconstructed at the other outer part of the city in the east. Selinus was founded, as we've got precise dates there. Here we go, by colonists in 651 from Greece, and the city, as it's there, the wild celery Salinon, that still grows in the locality, is great. It achieved great prosperity in the by about the 480s, 490s. There it is. After the Carthaginians lost the Battle of Himera in 480, Selinus allied itself with Syracuse against Carthage. Not a good idea, because the Carthaginians are very vengeful people after the revenge of blood. When I go on my when I do my ghost walks in Lantworth Major, I talk about the revenge of blood. If thou shalt kill somebody from Lantworth Major, the Lantworth Major people shall have a revenge of blood against your community. And in fact, the Carthaginians were very similar to that, but on a big scale. We're not talking about one person, we're talking about tens of thousands of people who are going to die. So again, these Segestians, who the Selinus people were actually against, and then appealed to Carthage for help in their struggle against Selinus. And consequently, a Carthaginian army of 100,000 men took and destroyed Selinus in 409. I'd probably say that's slightly exaggerated. I'd probably think it's more like 50,000 men, but that's still a friggin' big army. 100,000 men is what is it, a fifth of the force that landed at D-Day. You know, that's a lot of vessels. It really is a lot of supplies, you know. And we mentioned about 5,000 people went into slavery, 2,500 people escaped. Selinus never recovered. It became a Carthaginian sort of on the edges around the harbour areas, reoccupied, not the Acropolis area. Hannibal eventually razed it to the ground in 250, and then that's it. People who ever lived there were transferred everywhere else. And the final entry here, excavations have uncovered Selinus' extensive ruins and its history. History notwithstanding, it is surmised that the city's monuments were toppled by earthquakes, those that remained, and the 5 temples littered the fortified Acropolis, while the remains of 3 more ruined temples bearing massive Doric columns lie on the hillside of Selinus in the east. The modern Italian town of Celonunte lies nearby, and I tell you what, if you're ever going to Sicily, it's well worth a visit. On that note, that's actually a really nice, concise end to today. And so what I'm going to do is, yeah, that was pretty good of me. I've just didn't even go into a brick wall then. That was a good end. Keith, that's got to be one of the best ends.
That's very good. Extra bonus point for that one.
Thank you. I've already got 15 from you. Right, Goff, anything you'd like to say, darling?
No, that was really interesting. I pity you didn't get round to the Normans' influence, but no, very good. Thanks very much.
Bugger the Normans. I tell you what, do you know what I should do? We should do the Normans, say, the Norman fortresses, for example, in the Holy Land. That would be a good one to do. I'll think about that, yeah. That would be really different, yeah. Right, Keith.
No, that's fine. There's another place on the list I'd like to go and visit sometime.
Yeah.
If you're allowed out.
It's true.
Right, what about you, Arnold Nobrot?
No questions. Very interesting.
Sorry, I'm into insulting people today. I take that back. Right, Chris.
No, nothing, thanks, Carl. Very interesting.
Right, talk about Nobrot. We'll do Jim in a minute. Right, Jane.
All good, thank you. Yeah, well, I think we'll all have to go on an archaeology Cymru trip there.
That's we do.
Good to me.
Apparently, Goff's got the money and we're going his bloody high-speed boat. Remember that, Goff, about going across the Bay of Biscay? And
Yeah,
Ellen oh, God, no, we're not doing that. Oh, God.
Can arrange it.
Oh no.
I've been across the Bay of Biscay, no, thank you.
No, we're not doing that one. No, we're not. We've already had that big argument. Some of us agreed, and yeah, one didn't. Right, okay. What we're going to do these numpties now, and well, they're not answering. Come on, Boys and girls, come on, you've got the last say before we finish. By the way, whilst they're undoing their thing, don't forget we got next Friday.
I'm not sure we've got anything to say, really.
Oh, just one thing. You mentioned your Blevnian history walk, but you didn't say any more after saying you didn't know what you were doing.
What I'm thinking of doing, if we do a Monday week, right, that would be good.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
That sounds good.
And what time would that be at?
I think we'd do Monday week 11 o'clock, the same time as we did last time.
Oh, great.
That could work.
I'll just make sure the drugs work. But, that should be fine. I should be. Then we'll probably be done about 12:30, where I'll need to lie down in a corner. And don't forget. Don't forget the ghost work a week Friday, and don't forget to vote next Thursday as well before you do these classes. Anyway. So if there's no other questions, I really appreciate you joining us today, and that's been a good one. That flowed really well. Thank you very much. Thanks for your support last week. That was yes. Anyway, thank you very much, and I'll see you all soon. Thanks for that, Goff, Arnold, Chris.
Okay.
Bye. What date did you say the Lantwick walk was?
The Lantwick walk will be 7:30, and that'll be a week Friday.
Okay, thank you.
Let me know next week, and you'd be very welcome to join us. So, and Andrea, Kathy, and Jim, and Karen, if there's anything you want to ask me, I know. No, they're gone. See, they've all gone. Do you see what they gave an opportunity to say something? See you, Chris and Keith. Bye.
Okay, cheerio, everybody. Bye.
See you. Bye. Keith, don't forget to send the money through for the book.
Of course. I'll have 25 copies, please.
You're only allowed 30.
Oh, never mind. Cheerio.
Oh, Keith, what were you talking about before the break when you said you're going on holiday somewhere?
I said I was going up to York in August.
Oh, nice.
Going up for a week.
You're going to Betty's tea shop, are you?
It will be Betty's, and it will be the York Vic Centre and all the museums, hopefully. Just depending how many I can fit in the time.
Keith, you know what my advice? You know my advice on York is to go to lots of places that are off the beaten track, because there's a lot more to York than just the tourist trail. Yeah.
I'm sure there is. There is a good tourist office there, isn't there? So they should be able to put us right, I think. So
well, if you Keith, I've been there enough times. Any advice you want on it? I would say the highlight is usually the highlight is usually the where you've got the York Museum, and then you've got at the back you've got the Roman Barbican Tower.
Right.
That's really good. And then you've got and then you've got the little park, and you've got the old monastery and the friary. Oh, that's all good. That's a real, and it's usually relatively quiet as well.
Yeah. I love it all, really. That's the trouble.
I tell you what, Keith, right? Women not around, right? If we could ever have a woman in our lives and start afresh, it would be York.
Oh dear. Okay then, mate.
Anyway, I'll speak to you soon, Keith. Take care.
Cheerio, bye.
Take care.
Look
Bye.
after yourself.
I will, and I'll see you soon. That was good. That worked really well. There was a sort of keel down in the break, before the break, and it was and it went up. Cheers. Thank you very much for watching.